Executive summary: Infectious diseases have always crossed the national boundaries. However, the speed at which an infectious agent can now disseminate around the world was exemplified by the SARS coronavirus in 2003. This previously unknown virus emerged in the Guangdong province of China and rapidly disseminated around the world via the global airline transportation network. Canada imported the cases of SARS through airports in Vancouver and Toronto, leading to 44 deaths. Industry losses in billions of dollars and expenditures exceeding $1 billion to control the outbreak in Ontario. This landmark event highlighted Canada's vulnerability to global infectious disease threats. This report examines in unprecedented detail the complex and evolving fabric of the global airline transportation network from the perspective of Canadian public health security. Using real data on the complete architecture of the global airline transportation network and the more than 2 billion passengers traveling through it each year, this report meticulously evaluates Canada's vulnerability to global infectious disease threats, strategies to mitigate the risks of importation, and their consequences are proposed at three frontiers moving from domestic to international. 1. Reinforcing lines. One major domestic point of entry used by air travelers arriving in Canada. 2. Major international transit points used by air travelers coming to Canada. 3. Leading global sources of international air travelers coming to Canada. 1. Reinforcing lines of defense at major domestic points of entry. 3 cities, Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal receive more than 80% of all international air traffic flowing into Canada from the developing world. Thus, if global infectious disease threats are to breach Canada's borders by air, it is highly probable they will do so through one or more of these locations. By all metrics, Toronto is the most vulnerable domestic point of entry in Canada, ranking alongside the world's most centrally located cities within the global airline transportation network and receiving the international air traffic volumes of Vancouver and Montreal combined. Although it is a smaller, less populated city than Montreal, there are several reasons why Vancouver appears to be the second most vulnerable point in Canada. First, by most metrics, it is more centrally located within the global airline transportation network. Second, it receives a greater volume of international travelers from around the world than Montreal. And third, Vancouver is Canada's most strongly connected point to East Asia. East Asia is of special concern because it is where SARS originated, where human cases of highly pathogenic H5N1 avian influenza are occurring in their greatest numbers, and where many experts fear pandemic influenza and other emerging infectious diseases may originate. Should future threats arise in East Asia, Vancouver would likely be Canada's most vulnerable domestic point. This prediction is consistent with observations during SARS, as Vancouver received more imported cases of this disease than any other city in Canada. While Montreal is a major metropolis, it is more sequestered in the global airline transportation network than either Toronto or Vancouver, with a substantial majority of its international traffic originating in Europe, North Africa, and in the Middle East. These regions are felt to be of lower risk for the importation of emerging infectious diseases. Taking into consideration the global connectivity of Canada's largest cities and the presumed international sources of future infectious disease threats, it would be prudent for Canada to strengthen its emergency preparedness and response capabilities in Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal in this order of priority. At a minimum, Canada should consider designating its international airports at Toronto and Vancouver under the terms of the revised international health regulations, and strongly consider designating Montreal's international airport as well. While Calgary's status in the global airline transportation network is evolving, its current level of global connectivity via commercial air travel remains somewhat limited. Periodic re-evaluations of Calgary and their Canadian cities would be needed to determine how their status evolves over time. 2. Reinforcing lines of defense at major international transit points used by travelers coming to Canada. Of all international travelers arriving in Canada from the developing world, 60% use more than one flight to reach their final destination. Commercial airports outside of Canada where these flight connections occur represent a potential upstream frontier for intervention. Of note, half of all flight connections made by passengers traveling to Canada from developing areas of the world occur in the airports of just 9 cities worldwide. These cities listed by order of frequency are 1. London, UK, 2. Hong Kong, 3. Tokyo, 4. Frankfurt, 5. Paris, 6. Miami, 7. Amsterdam, 8. New York City, and 9. Chicago. In total, these 9 cities account for 1.4 million flight connections directing passengers into Canada every year. Given the potential for travelers infected with dangerous pathogens to become ill during flights or flight layovers, it may be prudent to collaborate with these airports and their respective governments in an effort to educate and to or screen travelers, particularly during the midst of epidemics of international significance. 3. Reinforcing lines of defense at leading global sources of international travelers to Canada. In order for global infectious disease threats to enter Canada's borders by air, a series of 3 connected steps must occur. First, an infectious agent of public health and/or economic significance must arise somewhere in the world. Second, the infectious agent must gain access to the global airline transportation network. And third, air traffic flows departing the source location must direct the agent into a commercial airport inside Canada's borders. Consequently, the risk of importing global infectious disease threats into Canada is a composite of the probabilities for each step. Considering these factors, 4 developing and 9 industrialized countries have been identified as important potential locations for which infectious disease threats may enter Canada's borders. Collectively, these 13 countries generate 80% of all international traffic entering Canada from around the world. Developing economies. China, including Hong Kong, generates the 3rd largest volume of international passenger traffic entering Canada after the United States and the United Kingdom. Of all international passengers entering Canada today, approximately 1 in 25 initials their trip from within China's borders. Of these passengers, 90% depart from just 3 cities: Hong Kong, Beijing, and Shanghai. China is of particular interest from the perspective of infectious disease threats because of the country's historical association with diseases such as SARS and the communicable agents of avian origin due to the high co-density of humans and birds. Furthermore, as a nation comprising extremely of poverty and wealth, conditions in certain areas of the country may foster the emergence of infectious diseases, while others provides a platform for international dissemination via air travel. In the case of SARS, a synergy of conditions contributed to the international dissemination of this disease, with its initial emergence and propagation in Guangdong province, coupled with the flows of air traffic generated by the 5th largest international airport in the world in neighboring Hong Kong. Similar conditions and circumstances could contribute to the international dissemination of pandemic influenza of avian origin, e.g., H5N1, or other infectious disease threats that may emerge from within China's borders. Mexico generates the second largest volume of international passenger traffic entering Canada from any developing country after China. A substantial majority of this traffic flows into Canada from resort cities like Cancun and Puerto Vallarta between January and April, largely representing Canadians returning home from winter and spring vacations. Throughout the year, however, Mexico City continues to be a steady source of air traffic into Canada, producing almost 190,000 passengers annually. After Hong Kong, Mexico City is the largest urban source of air traffic into Canada from a developing country. Poverty, high population density, limited healthcare resources, coupled with a high volume of international inbound traffic to Canada, provide conditions that could make Mexico City an important future source location. India is a major developing country with a high population density and the focal areas of accelerated industrialization. The conditions of poverty and expanding wealth within India bear striking resemblances to those felt in mainland China. Today, approximately 1 in 50 international travelers entering Canada's borders originated their trips from within India. Of these passengers, 80% depart from three cities: Delhi, Mumbai, and Amritsar. Amritsar. As India continues to industrialize and its relationship with Canada evolves, its significance as a potential source country for emerging infectious disease may rise in tandem. The Philippines generates the fifth largest volume of international passenger traffic entering Canada from the developing world, after China, Mexico, India, and Cuba. While Cuba produces a slightly higher volume of international traffic entering Canada than the Philippines, a substantial proportion of Cuba's traffic represents Canadian travelers returning home from winter and spring vacations between January and April. The Philippines is felt to be of a greater significance to Canada, as conditions in the country may be more conducive to the emergence of new or dangerous infectious diseases, and because the Philippines is tightly interconnected with other East Asia countries, where human cases of highly pathogenic H5N1 avian influenza are being reported in substantial numbers. Industrialized economies. The United States (US) generates by far the largest volume of international air traffic entering Canada of any country in the world. Today, approximately 1 in every 2 international passengers entering Canada does so from the US, while the US may be an unlikely source for the emergence of new or dangerous infectious disease threats. It alone generates over 13% of the world's international traffic volume, and in turn represents a high-risk destination in and of itself. Given the extensive population mixing between the two countries via commercial, air travel, and land border crossings, the U.S. should receive special consideration as an important potential location from which infectious disease threats may enter Canada, with 51% of Canada's international air traffic coming from the U.S. and 13% of the U.S.'s international air traffic coming from Canada. There are compelling reasons for both countries to cooperate on preparing for and responding to future global infectious disease threats. The European Union (EU) generates almost one-fifth of all international traffic entering Canada. Like the United States, the EU may be an unlikely source for the emergence of new or dangerous infectious disease threats. but it generates over 90% of the world's international traffic volume and consequently represents a high-risk destination in and of itself. Of EU member states, more than 75% of all traffic entering Canada originates from the following 5 countries by order of volume: 1. United Kingdom, 2. France, 3. Germany, 4. Italy, and 5. The Netherlands. As with the United States, there are compelling reasons for Canada to consider collaboration with the EU on addressing common risks of global infectious disease threats. Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan represent 3 highly industrialized economies in East Asia that could become primary sources of emerging infectious diseases to Canada, but may be more important as secondary sources after importing diseases from other, less developed countries in Asia. Collectively, these 3 industrialized economies generate 3.8% of Canada's total volume of inbound international air traffic. The spread of human infectious diseases is as old as human migration itself. However, since the advent of commercial air travel and the subsequent transformation in global population mobility, the line separating domestic from international threats has become increasingly blurred. While reinforcing domestic lines of defense is an essential component of a national biodefense strategy, Canada should consider a more diversified portfolio of options involving collaboration with specific airports, cities, and countries around the world if Canada wishes to play a more active role in delaying or even preventing the domestic entry of infectious disease threat altogether. Greater emphasis on international source control will be required. This report provides the data and evidence needed to help direct Canadian preparedness and response efforts to specific domestic and international locations that are most likely to serve Canada's national self-interests, while concurrently benefiting other countries and strengthening the fabric of global public health security.